Welcome to the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains, the first week of October. We are looking at some wonderful medicinal native plants today. These are very different than the plants we might have seen earlier in the year, in the spring. Of course, the plants were here, the trees were here, but many of these beautiful, wonderful, beneficial plants are in their glory at different times of the year. One of those is one of my favorites, and that's the witch hazel. So this is a tree used both by people like the Cherokee and by settlers coming here. And one of the reasons why I wanted to visit with you today and show you this tree is because it is the first week of full week of October, and this is sort of a Halloween time kind of tree. It's blooming now. See those beautiful blooms? Aren't they pretty? Those blooms are very unusual, of course. They are not like what you might see on a tree other times of the year, but that bloom, which is so interesting, is kind of its last hurrah here at the end of the season, here in the fall. So it's beautiful to see this tree doing that. You can also see the little pods on here, which are interesting. Isabel will pull that down so you can see some of the little pods on there. These actually crack open and have seeds inside them. But they do an interesting kind of process. So again, the bloom is here in the fall, which is really unusual. Witch hazel is useful for a variety of medicinal purposes. Many of you might be familiar with it as an astringent. It can be used both internally and externally to treat a variety of ailments. So it really is a beautiful and beneficial plant, and it's lovely to see it putting on its spectacle here at the end of the season while the leaves are changing and they're becoming beautiful. The blooms of this plant are just really lovely. So another wonderful plant that's really beautiful this time of year is wild aster, and they're everywhere. Some of our other more spectacular color plants are done now. You can see there's a little bee balm back here that's done. You can see it's not pretty anymore. It's not red anymore. All the flowers have fallen off. But we could still make tea from those leaves. We could still harvest that plant, even though it's not still pretty and blooming. Aster is a lovely plant, and it's got this nice light purple color, which is in beautiful contrast. If you still have ironweed blooming, which you might some places, which is a nice dark purple, it will look really pretty together. But it also has medicinal purpose. In the springtime, and if you visited with us in the spring, you get to hear about one of my very favorite spring plants, which is mayapple. Mayapple is a very powerful laxative. It really is useful in the spring when people have perhaps not been getting as much exercise or green vegetables, that sort of thing. So they're pretty interested in things that will help them to get back on track, digestively speaking. If you've had a little too much mayapple, if you need to not be going in that direction, aster is used for that. That's one of its uses. It is very useful for that. We also have another plant back here that is not blooming anymore, and we are going to take a look at this one, I think. There we go. This is jewelweed, and jewelweed is not blooming now. The blooms are about gone. You might still see a few of them. Jewelweed is also just a wonderful plant, and you can hear the water behind us probably. You can see sometimes it's called waterweed because it grows near creeks. It grows near bodies of water, marshy spots. And there are several varieties of jewelweed. You might see its pretty flowers, which are yellow or spotted or orange or red. It comes kind of this whole spectrum of colors. But it's a lovely plant for anything topical, any kind of poison ivy or insect bites or anything like that can be treated with jewelweed. And it has this great, the leaves, everything's eating these leaves now, so you can see that. But they're very squishy, squashy, and you can just rub them right together like that. Leaves, blossoms, anything. If one happens to blunder into poison ivy, one can just get a big fistful of that, smack it right on there, and that should alleviate some of the itching and the discomfort pretty quickly. Sometimes jewelweed, we'll hear it called wild touch-me-not, and unfortunately people think that means there's something bad about it, like it's going to make us itchy or make us uncomfortable. Not at all. In fact, it helps with those things. This is why it's called wild touch-me-not.
That's our seed pods. They're exploding here in the fall. When we touch those seed pods, they blow. Sometimes they really go in all directions. But that's why they're called wild touch-me-nots. It's not because they are harmful in any way. It's just because those seeds are very volatile, and they'll go off and spread and make more touch-me-nots for next year.
One of the most beautiful plants that we can see this time of year has a little bit of a bad reputation, and we always like to clear that up. This is goldenrod, which looks so pretty with those wild aster and those Joe Pye that have stopped. They're done by now for the most part around here. And ironweed, which is fading away here. If you get some nice dark purple ironweed with this goldenrod, it's a really beautiful combination. There are several different varieties of goldenrod, but they've all sort of interpollinated. So they kind of go everywhere, and they're very adaptable. Goldenrod grows in a wide variety of places. It grows just about everywhere. Unfortunately, many people think that they're sniffling and feeling a little uncomfortable and having some problems with this sort of a late season issue of sniffles. Sometimes people want to blame that on poor goldenrod. That is not goldenrod's fault for the most part. Most of the time, the culprit is another plant, which is ragweed. Ragweed is a dreadful plant. It does have some medicinal purposes, but it really hardly pays for its keep, considering how uncomfortable it makes everyone. Goldenrod just happens to be in the neighborhood and is blooming at the same time and is flashy and beautiful. But it does have a number of lovely medicinal uses. You can see it dries really beautifully. I have some right here. The root is actually used as a treatment for tuberculosis. It has some really valuable treatments that it provides. So it's a lovely medicinal plant, and it's also really important to our late season pollinator insects like butterflies and bees. You can hear the honeybees buzzing around right now. You may notice that in the fall very often bees' honey sometimes has kind of an unpleasant aroma. And that is because that's from the goldenrod. And the goldenrod was actually kind of a nice thing, the way that everything works. That makes sure that people don't want to harvest that honey this time of year. We leave that for the bees so that they'll be well supplied over the course of the winter. So you can maybe hear or see some of them buzzing around right now. But goldenrod really is a beautiful plant. And unfortunately, sometimes does get that sort of bad reputation, but it actually has many wonderful medicinal uses.
So a plant that I often enjoy discussing is this one. This is pokeweed, and this is the time of year when pokeweed is really putting on a show for us. Pokeweed comes up in the early spring, and it is edible when it first comes out of the ground. But it's almost as if this lovely pinky purple red stem is sort of a warning, saying, this is red for danger. It's almost as if it's saying, don't eat now. So once it starts to get a little bigger, it is dangerous and should not be eaten. However, the berries, the Cherokee use the berries in very small quantities for the treatment of rheumatism, which is really interesting because they are toxic. We can't have large quantities of these. It's very dangerous for humans. Now, birds will eat them. So if you've been around at this time of year and you've noticed these lovely, yucky purple and white splotches from the birds, that's what happens. I'm going to drop some. You can see the inside. It's very purpley. And see what it does to my fingers. It makes a lovely pink dye. That's the color that we get. And so pokeweed does definitely have a wonderful purpose, which is as a dye, but we don't want to eat too much of it or we might die. We certainly wouldn't want to do that. The root of this plant is also very interesting. It dries up. As you might imagine, this is not even one of the largest pokeweeds that I have nearby here. It has a huge root, and the root of this plant, once it's dried, is then ground up and used as a treatment on old wounds, on old sores. So it's quite a showy plant here at the end of the summer and into the fall, but it also certainly has a wide variety of uses, although we do have to be careful.
Thank you for joining us for our walk today, looking at some of our medicinal plants. Things like evening primrose and yarrow, they're everywhere. Enjoy these beautiful plants, these blessings that we have, and come with us for another walk very soon.